Alright everyone, welcome back to Newcastle Fans TV. My name's Matt and welcome to a brand new series all about fantasy football here on the channel. If you don't know anything about fantasy football, we're going to be using the Premier League's own fantasy football app and website. So if you go to FPL on Google or put it into the App Store or Google Play Store, you should find the relevant app. It's just the Premier League logo in green. And we're going to be setting up our own Newcastle Fans TV league on there. If you've seen on our socials already, you might have already set up a team and joined. If you haven't, feel free to head across to the website and set up your team. There should be a link in the description to set up your team, and our league code is N6CFST. So that'll be a couple of the admins in there on the channel, the guys you see on camera, and of course everyone that watches as well. If you want to join, you can jump in there and compete against other fans from across the country and across the world. Each week, hopefully, we're going to be bringing a couple of you on to talk about how well you've done. Hopefully, we'll get the top point scorer each week, talk about your choices going into the next week, why you're doing so well, etc., etc. But today, because it's just me, I'm going to be giving you a little bit of advice how to set your team up going into the first week, some top picks if you've not done it before, and maybe how to succeed. I'm going to hold my hands up. I've only won in a mini league once. I didn't do very well last year, so you might want to ignore all the advice I give to you. But I'm going to be going through my team for this season, going into the first week, and also some picks going forwards. Just a little bit about the app if you don't already know. So you get a choice of 15 players to pick in your squad with £100 million to spend. Players that will get you a lot of points in the season, so that's your golden boot winners, players that get a load of assists, etc. They're going to cost upwards of 10 million, or usually around the 12 million mark if they're midfielders or strikers. And cheap bit part players that usually bench warm or just are academy players, maybe a bit like Matty Longstaff, will be on the cheaper end of the scale, costing 4 or 5 million. So you've got to balance your squad. You can't just pile your squad with a load of big hitters, and you're allowed a maximum of 3 players from each team in your squad at one time. So you can't just load your squad with Liverpool or Man City players and the like. There are a few tokens that you can use through the season, but we'll explain them in the weeks to come, such as your bench boost, your triple captain, and your wild card, which you get to use twice a year. So we'll pick that up in the series as the year goes on. But everything's explained on the website if you're struggling. And let us know, tweet us at Newcastle Fans TV. Let us have a look at your teams going into the weeks, and we'll see how well you think you're going to do going into the first couple of weeks. But for now, let's have a look at some of the top picks that are going into the season. So I'm going to break it down by position, and I'm going to go through a few different choices. So if we start off in the defence, these are a few players that are absolutely no-brainers. They're almost guaranteed to score you points if you put them in your team. Obviously, they are going to cost a little bit more money than your average player, but here's my top 3 picks for going into the FPL season. First up, we've got Andy Robertson, obviously an attacking fullback for Liverpool alongside Trent, who is also my second pick. Those two bagged points galore last season. Trent got 210 points in the season. Robertson got 181. They were in the top scoring defenders in the entire league. Obviously, they do cost a bit more than your average defender. I think Trent is priced at maybe 7.5 million. And Robertson at 7, which is extortionate for a defender when the average is costing 6 or less. But the third pick is Cesar Azvilla, also known to his mates as Dave. He scored 130 points last season, which is quite good. And obviously Chelsea have stacked up their team this year, so they'll be pushing, hopefully they'll be thinking for a title challenge. We'll see how that turns out. But he is guaranteed to be a massive part of that team. Yes, they brought in big money signings, but at the end of the day, he's a bit part. He's not a bit part player for the club. He's a captain regularly, and he can play in loads of different positions, and he's a talisman for the team as well. So he's guaranteed to pretty much play 90 minutes of every game, and he chips in with the odd goal and assist from here and there. So he's a really good pick for your team. So that's just the defence. We'll go next into the midfield. These 3 players that I think you should almost definitely have one of these in your team, if not more. So we're going to start off with Mohamed Salah. Obviously, you know, he's been in contention with the Golden Boot in the past few seasons. Why wouldn't you have him in your team? Obviously, Liverpool will be looking to romp home for another league victory this season. So he'll be a massive part of that three-pronged attack with Firmino and Mane. Mane didn't quite make the cut for me. He did get a lot of points last season. Salah got 233, Mane got 221. So not a massive difference between the two. But I just picked Salah because he does bag a lot more goals and assists. Generally, he's a bit more consistent. And then Aubameyang's an interesting one because on the Fantasy Premier League app, he's classified as a midfielder. He is the most expensive midfielder, costing you 12 million, and he bagged 205 points last season. So he's sure to be an interesting pick in the midfield if you were to opt for him. Obviously, they got Fulham on the opening day of the season. That could be an interesting one. Could be 7-0 Arsenal or 1-0 Fulham. We never know with football, but Aubameyang is likely to get involved there. A great, great call to have in the start of the season. And last but certainly not least is Kevin De Bruyne. So he's not quite the most expensive midfielder, but he's second most. I think he costs 11.5 million, and he was the top scoring midfielder last year. He scored 251 points, and he plays in a free-flowing Man City team. He bags goals and assists for fun on the regular. And even though Pep Guardiola does like to rotate his squad, KDB is usually at the heart of those squads. So he's guaranteed to get you points. However, I would hold off putting him in your team straight away because both Manchester clubs don't have a fixture on the opening weekend. So he'll draw a blank for you, which is not great, considering you could have Aubameyang and then switch him out for Kevin De Bruyne in week 2, which is what I'm going to do, but I'll talk about that later on. But moving forwards into the forward position. So forwards are a little bit hard to come by when it comes to value for money. So I picked 3 here that should get you a decent goals to pound ratio. So the 3 that I've picked out are Raul Jimenez of Wolves, Harry Kane of Spurs, and Jamie Vardy of Leicester City. So Jimenez is obviously a fantastic player. We've seen him score many goals in the double digits for the past couple of seasons. And on the Fantasy Premier League, he's fantastic. He's the set piece taker when it comes to penalties. He scores goals for fun in a Wolves team that, did really well in the Europa League and the Premier League last year. So even though they've had the big money signing of Fabio Silva come in, he should still be leading the line. He's their number 9 after all. And he's a little bit cheaper than your other options as well. Harry Kane, really, really consistent option over the past few seasons. He's been a bit injury prone, but when he's fit, he bags points galore. And of course, Jamie Vardy, Golden Boot winner last year. Be interesting to see if he's still got it going into this season, obviously with him getting older, but he didn't seem to slow down at all last season. People thought he might slow down last season. Whether or not he does this season remains to be seen. So it'll be an interesting one with forwards. Obviously, you've got options like Aguero. I'd advise opting away from Aguero and Gabriel Jesus. You can go for them. They will score you points, but Pep Guardiola is notorious for rotating his squad. So you might be frustrated when one of them comes off the bench to play 2 minutes and get you 1 point on the fantasy app, which I fell victim to many a time last year. Right, so next, those were the big hitters, the people that are guaranteed to get you points week in, week out. The next lot of players that I'm going to talk about, they're what's called differential. So players that not everyone will have, players that might cost a little bit less. They might not be as consistent, but they'll have the odd game where they'll shine, they'll bag a couple goals or a couple assists. So without further ado, we'll move on into the defensive position. So I've got another Liverpool defender in here, Nico Williams. So he's not going to start ahead of Trent or Robertson. However, Klopp was using him a lot towards the end of last season, even started a couple of games for them, and he scored the winner for Wales in the Nations League recently. He's obviously got a big part of Klopp's plans going into the next season. He will be a bench player for the most part, but he is one of the cheapest defenders on the game. He only costs 4 million, and I don't think there's anyone cheaper than that available. So if you want to have him on your bench, it is a good option because he'll be getting a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there. And if Liverpool are anything like as attacking as they were last year, he's guaranteed to get a couple of points. Next up is Kyle Walker-Peters. So he signed on a permanent transfer from Spurs to Southampton this summer. He was on loan last season and he impressed. So he can play on either fullback position and he likes to get forwards, gets a couple goals and assists here and there. Again, only costs 4.5 million. And if Southampton play the kind of football they were playing last season, they might become a bit more dynamic going forwards. And hopefully they'll keep a few clean sheets and he'll get a few attacking contributions as well. And looking at attacking contributions, my third pick is Ayling from Leeds. Now, Leeds are notorious in the Championship for playing free-flowing attacking football, and those fullbacks are asked to press really, really high, which is why I've picked him out. Also, Stuart Dallas is another option from Leeds if you're looking for Leeds defenders. It'll be interesting to see how they adapt to the Premier League, because we saw the same with Norwich last season. They're a free-flowing attacking team, dominated the Championship, came up and really, really suffered for it. So I doubt that Leeds will do the same. They've got, in my opinion, a much better coach in Marcelo Bielsa, which is why I've picked out Ayling here as one of the picks going forwards. He should be consistently picked in that starting 11. Bielsa likes to stick to his guns. He's faithful to his players, so there shouldn't be too much rotation there. So he's almost guaranteed to start. Leeds will keep a few clean sheets here and there, I think, from the way they play football. So he's a really good option at only 4.5 million to put in your team. But moving forward to the midfield area now, these are a little bit weird because they are popular players. They're just not as consistent as those ones we mentioned earlier. So we've got Adama Traore from Wolves, Riyad Mahrez from Manchester City, and Mason Greenwood from Man United. Again, starting with Greenwood, it's an interesting one. Like Aubameyang, he's a striker, or he plays as a striker in real life usually, but he's been chosen to be a midfielder on fantasy football. And at only 7.5 million, that could be a steal. If Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is going to start the same players that he was starting towards the end of last season, it'll be interesting to see Greenwood playing a front three with Martial and Rashford. He'll be getting goals and assists with those two. And at only 7.5 million, he could be really, really valuable. Like I said, though, with Kevin De Bruyne, both Manchester clubs don't have a fixture on the opening day. So it might be worth leaving him out until game week 2 and bringing him in and freeing up a bit of cash for the rest of the team. With Mahrez, he's only 8.5 million, one of the cheaper options if you're looking for a City player going forwards. And he was really, really consistent last year with scoring points. So he was actually the seventh highest scoring midfielder in the league last season. So on FPL, excuse me. And he only costs 8.5 million, like I say. So he could be a really good option. The only danger with him is Guardiola's rotation. Like I say, you never know if Mahrez is going to start, if he's going to play 45 minutes off the bench, if he's going to play 5 minutes, if he's not going to play at all. So it is a risk bringing him into your team. And also, if you are looking to bring in a couple of other City players as well, you might look to Kevin De Bruyne or Sterling, who play a bit more regularly and score a couple more points than him. But he is a good differential option to have. And Adama Traore, again, a player that's not really reached his full potential as of yet, so maybe the coming season is his chance to do so. He's obviously exciting to watch with blistering pace, but doesn't really come up too often with attacking contributions. But he does only cost 6.5 million, which is why I think he might be a good option going forwards. So we'll see how that goes for him. And he did combine well with Jimenez going forwards last season. So with a front three of him, Jimenez and Jota, it might be worth sticking him in your team for only 6.5 million. He could bag you a few points, even if he was just a bench player for you. And having done the midfielders, let's move on to the attackers now. So a bit like Nico Williams, Ryan Brewster is one to watch out for. So he was used in Liverpool's preseason quite a lot. However, it is rumoured that Klopp is looking to engineer a permanent transfer away for Brewster. So it might be worth keeping an eye on that. However, at only 4.5 million, the cheapest striker on the game, he is a steal. He looks like he's going to be a bit more of a player. If he stays at Liverpool, he might have the same role that Origi did last season, so coming off the bench for the odd 20 minutes. And he does look an exciting young player that's going to bag goals occasionally, maybe against those lower teams like Brighton and Villa and, dare I say, us. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops. Antonio is another interesting one because he's 6.5 million, so a lot cheaper than your Harry Kane's or your Jamie Vardy's, and he had a really, really strong finish to the end of last season. Scored 4 goals in one game, which obviously was a dream for those fantasy managers that had him in their team. So it'll be interesting to see if he kicks on, especially with their first game being against Newcastle on the opening weekend. Hopefully he draws a blank in that game and gets sent off. Like, we'd love them to go down to 10 men, but I can see him really improving in that West Ham side. So keep an eye on him, might be worth putting in your team. And probably the most exciting differential going into next season for me is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So Everton have done some really good business in the transfer market. They brought in Doucouré in the midfield position and also James Rodriguez for a bit of creativity in the number 10 spot. Calvert-Lewin only cost 7 million on the game, and he bagged a few goals last season in a struggling Everton side. So if those players can adapt to Everton's style of play with Ancelotti at the helm, I think Calvert-Lewin could really kick on and get, 15, possibly even 20 goals next season. I know that's a big claim. I'm sticking my neck out on the line. We'll see if that backfires. Probably will, and me. I know nothing. But like I say, you can choose to ignore me. I'm sure a lot of you will. So yeah, they were the differentials. And last but certainly not least, I'm going to talk about a few Newcastle players who you should definitely consider putting in your fantasy team. So we'll start right at the back. I know I've not talked about any goalkeepers so far. That's because it should be a no-brainer for me. So you want to go for one goalkeeper that is, in my opinion, you should go for one goalkeeper that's cheap as chips and is not going to play, and another that is either mid-range or take a high punt on Edison or Alisson. So for mid-range, you're going to go for a burnt Leno, but for Newcastle, I'm going to say Martin Dubravka when he's fit and playing, because we'll keep a few clean sheets. We know we will. We've made St. James's a fortress in the past. However, on fantasy football, you also get bonus points for the amount of saves you make. So for a goalkeeper, if they're being peppered, they're going to get more points for that. Obviously, if they concede, they don't get as many points. However, the more saves they make, the more points they get. So obviously, Dubravka was had one of the top save ratios in the Premier League last season. Hopefully, he'll carry on to do that in this season, and that's why I think he should definitely go in your team. In terms of the defence, I'm going to say two players because I don't have that much trust in our defence. One is Jamal Lascelles, because he's almost guaranteed to play 90 minutes of every game, being the captain of the club. He's only 4.5 million, which is a steal, especially considering the amount of clean sheets we should ideally be getting. And the second is Jamal Lewis, brand new signing, attacking left back, should walk straight into that first team. Again, only £4.5 million. So I'll be putting Lewis in my first team, and I'll be considering Lascelles for later in the season. So hopefully Lewis can kick on, get a few clean sheets, and also some attacking contributions like Jethro Williams did for us last season. And then looking forwards, there'll be three midfielders that I'm considering this season. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, saint-maximin is only £5.5 million on this app, and I think you're stupid if you don't have him in your team. He was electric for us last season, and almost everything came through him. So at 5.5 million, it'd be daft not to have him in. And then, of course, Ryan Fraser, brand new signing. He's not fit for the first game week, apparently, so maybe hold off putting him in. But he's only £6 million. And across the past two Premier League seasons, he's the fourth most assisted player in the league, and that's up there with Kevin De Bruyne and Mo Salah. So he'll be a one to watch, especially partnering up with Callum Wilson as well. And the third midfielder is Miggy, of course, 6 million as well. I wouldn't take a risk on him just at the start of the season, just to see how much game time he actually gets. Obviously, with the new signings coming in, be interested to see Miggy's role, whether he'll be a number 10 or if he'll still be played as a winger, see how much game time he actually gets. But he's still cheap. 6 million is a good price, and obviously he kicked on in last season. He got a lot more goals than he did before in the half of the season before. So it'll be interesting to see if he can carry on that run of form into the new season. And last but certainly not least for Newcastle is Callum Wilson. So undoubtedly going to be our new number one striker. And he only costs 6.5 million in the app, which he'll be going straight in my team as well, which we're coming up to shortly. He's a fantastic player for Bournemouth. He had a poor season last season, admittedly. However, before that, he's notorious for scoring goals in what's arguably a weak side and a weak Bournemouth side. So partnering up with Fraser and also with the creativity of saint-maximin and Shelvey, looking for runs in behind like Gale used to run the channels. It'll be interesting to see Wilson, and he also loves a goal against West Ham as well. So I'm putting him in for the first week. And speaking of who I'm putting in for the first week, it is time to have a sneak peek of what my team looks like going into the first set of fixtures. So feel free to copy me, steal my ideas or whatnot. I'll undoubtedly change this before kickoff, but this is what it looks like. I'm going for Leno in goal, Van Dijk, Tierney and Walker-Peters at the back, Aubameyang, Havertz, Mane and saint-maximin in midfield, Wilson, Werner, Rodrigo in the attack, and then Nyland, Lewis, Harrison and Dallas on the bench. Okay, So a quick explainer of the rules, if you don't already know, the way that the game works, that you have your starting 11, as you can see on screen, and the 4 players at the bottom are on your bench. If a player in your starting 11 doesn't play for whatever reason, so that means they get 0 minutes, even if they sit on the bench the entire game, then they will sub off for one of your bench players, providing that your bench players play. And you can also see the little C and the V that I've got on Wilson on Havertz. That is my captain and my vice captain. So your captain gets double points every game week. So that's every set of fixtures. You can select a captain and they will get double points for whatever they score in that week. However, if that captain doesn't play, so they play 0 minutes in that game week, then your vice captain then gets double points. If your captain plays, then your vice captain just gets the normal points that they would. But if your captain doesn't play, then your vice would get double the amount of points. If neither of them play, then tough luck. But you've got to select wisely. So first week, I'm going for Callum Wilson. Hopefully, he's going to bag a hat-trick against West Ham. You never know. So he's who I'm going to captain going in that first week. I'm going to bench Jamal Lewis, but I'm going to make him my first substitute just in case we keep a clean sheet and someone else can sub off for him. And I'm starting those players in there. I think Rodrigo might nab one against Liverpool. And I think that Werner is going to have a rout as well. So let me know in the comments if you think my selections are good, if you think I'm chatting rubbish. Let us know down below. And hopefully next week we'll be chatting with a couple of you to see how you've done in the league. Don't forget that you can join our league if you go to the FPL website or the app. Our league code is just on screen now. It's N6CFST. And you can join our league and compete with a couple of the guys you see in the videos and also fans across Newcastle. So that's pretty much it for this week. We'll crack on and we'll see how I do in when it comes down to it in the first set of fixtures. Hopefully we'll bag a win and hopefully my fantasy team can sit pretty at the top of the league. But for now, thanks for watching. I've been Matt and you're watching Newcastle Fans TV.